Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. I appreciate you being here. In today's video, I am going to be covering the support mastery tree. Now, masteries are an incredibly essential part to getting the optimal build for your champions. Which masteries you choose can drastically change the performance of the champion and change the way that their skills work in battles. Now, when we first start out, we get into masteries, we know that they're important, but there's a lot of information there. It can be a little bit overwhelming. And so often what we do is we watch a content creator video on a champion that we are going to build, or we go to a website and do some research and just plug in masteries that somebody else has chosen. But just like in all my videos, what I'd like to be able to do is empower you to understand why those choices are important so that you know that you're selecting the very best masteries, not only for your champion, but for the team composition that you're going to be using that champion in and the fight that you're going to be going up against. So we're going to talk about every mastery in depth. We're going to cover some example champions that you might want to consider putting those masteries on. And we're also going to talk about some masteries that you might need to avoid in certain cases. I hope you're ready. Let's get started. Okay, so here we are. Now the champion doesn't really matter here. I just picked a champion that had no masteries, but I do want to talk about all of the trees very briefly. They are labeled offense, defense, and support. And so I think early on there's some confusion because we often think that offense is the tree for attack-based champions, defense is the tree for defensive-based champions, and support is only for anybody labeled support. And that's not true. These trees shouldn't be labeled this way. I think this is confusing to early game players. A better way to think about this is that the offense tree is the damage tree. This is how you get extra damage out of your champions. The defense tree is probably the most appropriately named tree. It's the survivability tree. This is how to reduce damage and potentially how to get extra utility out of defensive-based champions, but it also includes things like counterattack. And then the support tree is okay to think of it as a support tree, but it's much more versatile than that, and I like to think of it as the utility tree. This is the tree where you're going to get extra value out of specific types of skills that aren't primarily focused on damage. Okay, as I mentioned, today we are going to focus on the support tree, and just some quick terminology to start. First of all, I am going to call these tiers. So the rows, this is the first row here. It has the steadfast mastery and the pinpoint accuracy mastery. I'm going to call that first row tier 1. You can also call it 1-star masteries. They're sometimes referred to that way. And they correspond with the stars on your champions. So every champion that is uncommon and above has access to masteries. Common champions, I don't think can get masteries at all. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I've never really built out a common champion. So each tier corresponds to a star level. So in order to get tier 5, you're going to need to have 5 stars on your champion. In order to get tier 6, you're going to need 6 stars on your champion. Now, in addition, I'm going to talk about the columns. So obviously there's a left column. I'm going to call this column 1. The column 2 that starts here with steadfast, that's column 2. The column that starts with pinpoint accuracy is 3. And then the outside column, the right-hand column, is column 4. Now, I'm just going to do that so we can quickly have a way to refer to specific masteries if you're thinking about like a grouping, whether it's the tier 4 masteries or the left column, the column 1 masteries, and so on and so forth. That terminology should stay true for all of the videos, regardless of which tree we're actually talking about. All right, so one of the things that you should know right away about any of these trees is that you can only get 1 tier 1 mastery and you can only get 1 tier 6 mastery. In every other tier, tiers 2 through 5, you can get 2 in the same tree. You can only get 2 tier 1 masteries, so you can only choose 2 different trees. So for instance, you can choose the support tree and the defense tree, and you can choose 1 tier 1 mastery from support and 1 tier 1 mastery from defense. As soon as you choose a second tree, that will lock out the third tree and you can no longer use that tree. So if you choose support and defense, that means no offense. Even though you can have 1 mastery of tier 1 in 2 different trees, you can only have one total tier 6 mastery. We call that the capstone. So you can have one capstone mastery. So one of these trees is going to be your primary tree. If you want to think of it that way, it's going to be the one where you go all the way to tier 6 on your 6-star champions. And the other tree is going to be the secondary tree, because even if you end up choosing more masteries in it, you are not choosing the capstone in that tree. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the tier 1 masteries in the support tree. Now in column 2, we have Steadfast, which gives you additional flat max HP. So just an 810 max HP bonus. The second choice is Pinpoint Accuracy, which gives you an accuracy of 10, just 10, not 10%, just an additional 10 accuracy. Now, when choosing between these two, if you're looking for champions who could use these, there are a couple of considerations. For Steadfast, there are scenarios where any champion who is HP based and just needs the maximum amount of HP, you could go this route. One of the things to consider about choosing your very first mastery is which side of the tree you're on. So if you start on the left side, it is trickier to get to the right side of that tree. And so in a lot of cases, the masteries are grouped sort of according to the right side or the left side, with the middle ones being a little bit more flexible. So typically, if you chose Steadfast, you would probably choose it for a champion that needed max HP. And if you look down here at the capstone in column 1, this Elixir of Life also gives max HP. So if you are looking to boost your max HP by as much as is humanly possible, this would be one way you could go. Another reason to pick Steadfast, and probably the most common reason to pick Steadfast, is that the clan boss considers Steadfast as a buff. And that makes the champion, a champion that has Steadfast on it, less likely to become the stun target of the boss. Now, there are a bunch of other factors that go into stun targeting. I've done a video on that, so you can go and watch that video. But if you need a tiebreaker between two champions that are, say, both weak affinity against a particular affinity of clan boss, Steadfast can break that tie, and you can direct the stun to a particular champion. So Steadfast is used primarily for that purpose, or to get to the left side of the mastery tree. Now, Pinpoint Accuracy is just flat accuracy. And like the left side is based around health, the right side of this tree is based primarily around accuracy and utility for debuffing. So if you have any debuffer, anybody who needs to land a debuff, that could be a poisoner, so it could be a damage dealer. That's why this is not just a support tree. Remember, a lot of champions could use accuracy. Anybody that lands an instant effect on the enemy, lands a debuff of any kind, could use more accuracy. And accuracy is one of the more difficult stats in the game to compile. So this is probably the more common of the two tier 1 masteries. And pretty much every debuffer, poisoner, HP burner that you have, every turn meter controller, all of those champions are going to be starting off with Pinpoint Accuracy. Okay, so now we go to tier 2, and if we stay on the left-hand side, you can see in column 1, we have Lay on Hands, which increases the value of heals this champion casts by 5%. This is very simply the healer mastery. So you would go to Lay on Hands with any healer. That may require you to start with Steadfast on some champions. You can get to Lay on Hands from the right side. So if you choose Pinpoint Accuracy, you would then have to come down diagonally to the left into column 2, pick up Shield Bearer, and then you could go horizontally across to get Lay on Hands. So that's the way it works. Each mastery must be connected to a mastery on the previous tier, but you can connect diagonal. You cannot have a mastery that skips or is disconnected from the chain. Now, Shield Bearer here is for your shield champions. This just increases the shield buffs by 5%. The third one is Exalt in Death, and this heals this champion by 10% of their max HP the first time an enemy is killed in each round. Now, there are several reasons why you might want Exalt in Death, but primarily this is going to be on a champion that you want to be extremely survivable in a fight where there are going to be multiple deaths. So this is not a good clan boss mastery, because it will literally have no function in clan boss because nothing dies, right? No enemies die. However, this could be useful on a go second arena team, on a reviver or a healer or a cleanser, or even maybe a defensive based nuker, assuming you're not going down the defense tree for that champion. Now over here in column 4, we have charged focus. This increases the accuracy by 20% when this champion has no skills on cooldown. This is sort of the default mastery for any debuffers. So remember, with debuffers, we're already starting on the right side of this mastery tree, and we would continue that by moving all the way to the right here with charged focus. This is especially useful for any debuffers in a go first arena team, because you're not going to have any skills on cooldown when you go. So if you're opening with a debuff, this is going to work great for you. Now, once you have skills on cooldown, this becomes less valuable. But if you cycle back around to a moment when you have no skills on cooldown again, this would then apply. A quick note about this skill and all of the skills below tier 1, or I'm sorry, all the masteries below tier 1, is that this accuracy won't show up in your build. So when you're looking at your stats of a champion, this 20 accuracy doesn't exist. So you have to calculate it in on your own. So now in tier 3, if we go to column 1, we can see that the masteries have combined healing and shielding. So healing savior increases the amount of healing and the value of shield buffs placed by this champion by 10% if the target ally has 40% HP or less. So at this point, the left-hand column is for your healers and your shield champions. In column 2 here, we have rapid response. This has a 30% chance of increasing the turn meter by 10% when a buff cast by this champion is removed or expires. Now, if you are trying to get as much turn meter out of a champion as possible, you want them to go as fast as possible and get back to their skills as quickly as possible. This is one mastery that you can use for a buff-based champion. Remember, the more buffs that you have or you are applying with the champion, the more opportunities you're going to get to increase turn meter. So somebody who places AoE buffs, multiple buffs, this is going to be a good mastery for that champion. Now, a quick note, and this is incredibly important. If you are speed tuning a clan boss team, you need to avoid all turn meter fill masteries. You do not want to mess with your turn meter if you're trying to speed tune. Likewise, you want to avoid masteries that reset skill uses for champions that might give buffs or might affect turn meter in that clan boss speed tune. So if you have a Seeker is a champion that gives a 30% turn meter fill, you want that to be predictable. You want that turn meter fill to be exactly in the same place every time. If you're filling this turn meter by 10% when a buff wears off, then all of a sudden you're throwing that speed tune out by accelerating that champion more than can be accounted for, because this is only a 30% chance. So sometimes it'll happen, sometimes it won't. If this were a 100% chance, that would be fine. Then you could count on it and speed tune it. So any mastery that has a percent chance of increasing turn meter needs to be avoided in a speed tune clan boss team. Okay, in column 3 here, we have Swarm Smiter. This increases accuracy by 4% for each enemy alive, and this stacks up to 16. So again, for any debuffer that needs maximum accuracy, this is the most common mastery for that type of champion. Now here in column 4, we have Arcane Celerity. Much like the column 2 mastery, this has a 30% chance of increasing turn meter by 10%, but in this case, it is when a debuff expires. So just like the column 2 mastery, again, what's the name of that mastery? Rapid Response. Just like Rapid Response, Arcane Celerity has a chance of increasing turn meter, but in this case, it is for debuffers. Probably the best version of this would be either somebody who has a lot of AoE debuffs, or maybe an AoE poisoner or HP burner, who you want to, again, get as much turn meter as possible. Just like Rapid Response, you cannot speed tune a champion that has this mastery, so avoid this for any speed tune compositions. In tier 4, if we go to the left-hand column, we find ourselves still with the heals and the shields. So again, this increases healing and shielding, this time by 15% if the target ally has a CC on them. This second ability here, Cycle of Magic, is a bit of a strange mastery. This has a 5% chance of decreasing the cooldown of a random skill by 1 at the start of every turn. It's only a 5% chance, but on some champions, certain skills are so important that you want them to come back around as much as possible. Now, there are other ways to get skill cooldowns reduced, whether that's with a champion who decreases cooldowns or like a reflex set, that's an artifact set that has a chance of reducing a cooldown. So if you're looking for a champion to come back around to a specific skill as quickly as possible, this may be a mastery that you want to put on that kind of champion. But just like the turn meter masteries, you have to watch out for this one in a clan boss speed tune. Because if this decreases the cooldown of a speed buff or a turn meter fill or a block debuffs buff or a cleanse or something like that, then that can change your speed tune and break it. So you have to really be very, very careful about choosing Cycle of Magic for a clan boss speed tune team. And I would say if you're not super familiar with speed tuning, just avoid Cycle of Magic altogether. The third mastery here in tier 4 is Lore of Steel. This is the one I usually choose for most of my champions that need stat accumulation. So this increases the base stat set bonuses of all artifacts that increase base stats by 15%. This increase is multiplicative, not additive. So basically what it means is imagine you have an accuracy set. Accuracy set increases your base stat accuracy by 40. So this would increase that increase of 40 by 15%. So you would get an additional 6 accuracy out of an accuracy set. If there is a percentage increase, like in speed, if you have a speed set, you get a 12% increase in speed as the set bonus. This 15% would be 15% of that 12%. So you would get an additional 1.8% of speed, taking you from 12% per set up to 13.8% speed per speed set. Now, this doesn't help any sets that don't deal in base stats. So for instance, if you are using a Savage set, which ignores 25% defense, that is not affected by this because that ignored defense doesn't affect base stats. So you're not going to get an extra 15% of that 25%. So if you're using this, if you're using a Savage set on a damage dealer, you'd have to really consider whether or not Lore of Steel would be worth it for the 2 pieces that remain on that damage dealer. But typically, anybody who uses a utility set, like a reflex set or a relentless set or a retaliation set or a provoke set or a stun set or a toxic set, all of those sets do not affect base stats, and therefore Lore of Steel is completely useless on champions that are running those particular artifact sets. But if you are running offense or life or defense, if you are running speed or perception, if you're running accuracy, or if you're running anything that just gives you more stats, resilience, then this is going to be a decent mastery for those types of champions. Evil Eye is a very interesting mastery. I really enjoy this mastery on certain champions. So this decreases the target's turn meter when this champion hits them with a default skill for the first time. Default skill means you're A1. Decreases the turn meter by 20% with single target skills and by 5% with AoE skills. Occurs once per target. So basically the way this works is the first time a champion uses its A1 against a target, it decreases turn meter. Now that can be really helpful if you need turn meter control and you need to bring in a champion who has no turn meter control. You know, for the very first hit, at least of that A1, you're going to get a 20% turn meter reduction. So in places like Fire Knight, that can be very helpful to get that first shield down and then actually apply some turn meter decrease so that you can turn meter control that boss before the shield goes back up. This stacks with champions who have turn meter reduction. So if you have a champion who's getting 10% or 20% turn meter reduction and they have Evil Eye, they will get an additional reduction, which means that first hit is going to be much more turn meter reduction than they would get otherwise. Another really nice aspect of Evil Eye is it requires no accuracy. So if you have a champion who doesn't have any debuffs and wouldn't bring any accuracy, they can still get some turn meter reduction out of the skill, and it will land 100% of the time. This turn meter reduction cannot be resisted, and like I said, it requires no accuracy, so it is a guaranteed effect. Finally, one of the things that you want to know about this is that it occurs once per target. So if you are in a multi-target battle, like let's say you're doing waves in Doom Tower, If you switch your target, you can hit every single target with your A1 once if you are single target, and it will reduce the turn meter each time. Secondary and further hits against the same target won't reduce additional turn meter. But like I said, if you have several champions with this on their A1, you can cycle through all of the enemies and constantly reduce their turn meter. One thing to note about Evil Eye is there are fights where you do not want to reduce the turn meter of the enemy. For instance, in Bommel, it can be very dangerous to reduce Bommel's turn meter because he drops additional dread bombs. So if you put Evil Eye on a champion and then you take him into Bommel and try to, clear Bommel with that champion, you may have actually made your job harder. So be careful when you're choosing this and make sure that it's not going to be on a champion that you want to use in your Bommel rotation. We are up to tier 5, and again on the left-hand side, we have transitioned away from healing and shielding to a buff extension. So this is a 30% chance to extend the duration of any buff cast by this champion for 1 turn, with the exception of the unkillable buffs and the taunt buff. So no block damage, no unkillable, no revive on death, and no taunt. However, there are a ton of good buffs that you can extend with this, including strengthen, ally protect, shield, continuous heals, block debuffs. All of those buffs can be extended, including, the increased attack, increased crit rate, increased crit damage. So every buff except these 4 can be extended. It is a 30% chance, so it's not going to happen every time. But if you're going to get a lot of value out of having buffs up, for instance, let's say in Clan Boss, this would be something that you could consider. One tricky thing about Clan Boss is if you are using a champion who places a speed buff, then the duration of that speed buff must be predictable for your speed tune to work. If you accidentally extended the duration of a speed buff, let's say only on 1 champion or 2 champions out of your 5 champions, that would break your speed tune. So just like turn meter increase masteries, this one needs to be carefully chosen, especially for any speed tune composition that you're working on. Now, if you don't have an increased speed buff in your speed tune, then you can go ahead and do this pretty much and not worry about it. The second mastery here is Spirit Haste. This increases speed by 8 for each dead ally, stacks up to 24. You can put this on anybody who is a reviver, because they're going to get faster as their allies die, and that means they're going to get back to their revive more quickly. You can also put this on a champion that you want to solo with. So one of the factors of soloing effectively is getting as much speed onto your soloer as possible, both to potentially cycle rounds and get things like your regeneration set proccing more often, or to just lay down more damage on the boss, or to get back to certain important skills more quickly. Because it's a solo champion, in a lot of cases, you will put a solo champion in with a bunch of food. That food will die, and that will activate Spirit Haste and give you potentially 24 additional speed. If you are using an unkillable Clan Boss team that is speed tuned and revives are part of that, this could potentially mess it up. But in most cases, you're okay using this for Clan Boss if you're speed tuned. Sniper is the column 3 mastery here. And this increases the chances of placing any debuff from skills or artifacts by 5%. Now, it will not place any of the hard CC debuffs. It doesn't increase the chance of placing that. So it's not going to increase the chance of stun or fear or provoke or any of those. And that's true whether it comes from a skill or it comes from an artifact set. However, it will improve your chances of placing a slow. And so that can actually be pretty significant because there are a lot of champions out there who have slows on their A1 that aren't 100%. It can also increase your chances of placing poisons or HP burns. It can also increase the chance of any debuff if it is not 100%. If you have a champion who has a 100% chance of placing their debuff, this doesn't help. You can't have a 105% chance. That doesn't help you overcome the resistance of your target or anything like that. So only use this if you have a very important debuff that you need to place that is not being placed at 100%, and remember, it can't be a CC other than slow. In the 4th column, we have Master Hexer. This has a 30% chance to extend the duration of any debuff cast by this champion. So on the left-hand side, we had the ability to extend buffs, and over here on the right-hand side, which is the accuracy side for debuffers, we can extend the duration of any debuff. So as you can see, there is a logic to the distribution of these masteries in terms of their placement in various columns. So again, you can't extend the duration of any of the CCs, although again, you can extend the duration of a slow. But for any champion that you want to increase their uptime on important debuffs like decreased defense, weaken, slow, maybe poisons, maybe HP burns, this will extend those. One thing to note here is it will not extend the duration of bombs, and that's important because bombs need to be on a predictable cooldown because they only do damage when they blow up. So you wouldn't want to extend the duration of a bomb debuff. That wouldn't make any sense. Now we get to the capstones. Now we've already talked about Elixir of Life, and again, the only reason to pick this one is to get your champion either as survivable as possible or to max out that HP pool. One reason you would want to do this is if you had a healer, say, who healed based on his own max HP, then you could increase the max HP of that champion to get a bigger heal. This is a rarely chosen mastery, but there are a few champions where this is valuable. But you do want to consider whether you would get more value out of more HP on your champion, or if you would get more value out of either one of the other capstones in this tree, or one of the other capstones in whatever your other tree is, whether that's the offense tree or defense tree. For almost every clan boss champion, you are going to be choosing a 6-star or a tier 6 mastery from the offense tree, even if it's a support-based champion or utility-based champion. So if you are considering this particular champion for the clan boss, you're probably going to want to avoid Elixir of Life. In tier 2, we have Timely Intervention. Increases this champion's turn meter by 20% whenever an ally hero drops below 25% HP. So again, this is in column 2, so it's attached to the left side of the column, which is for healers and revivers. So this is basically a great skill if you are if you have one champion who's trying to keep everybody alive. It can also work for shielders, by the way. Basically, when an ally gets hurt, that you're going to get turn meter and get back to your heal, your shield, or your revive more quickly. There are a few other reasons to use this mastery, but those are the primary types of champions that are going to get the most value out of Timely Intervention. In tier 3, we have Oppressor. Oppressor increases the turn meter fill rate by 2.5% for each active debuff cast by this champion, stacks up to 10%. I don't know why they went with the turn meter fill rate here. I'm having difficulty seeing the difference between that and speed. It feels like this just gives you additional speed up to 10% because speed determines turn meter fill rate. So I think of this as 2.5% additional speed for each debuff cast by this champion. If you're casting AoE debuffs, you're likely going to max this out pretty easily. So again, if you need to come around to very important debuffs very quickly and turn meter fill is fine on the composition that you're running, you could potentially consider Oppressor. I very rarely use this capstone. In fact, I don't think I've ever used this capstone, maybe. But I could imagine that there are a few cases where you could really want additional speed, and this is the speed capstone. Finally, we have Eagle Eye on the right-hand column, column 4, which makes sense because that is the accuracy column. So this is just flat accuracy of 50. This is significant for any arena debuffer or any hard doom tower debuffer. As you get up into the higher ranks of arena, there will be more and more resist on the revive champions and the healing champions and the tanks. So you're going to need additional accuracy to overcome that. In addition, as you get up to the very top of Doom Tower Hard, the resistance levels of those bosses gets incredibly high. So landing your debuffs can be really tricky, and an additional 50 accuracy can really make a difference. So Eagle Eye is probably my most commonly chosen capstone in this tree when I actually go to tier 6 for a support champion. Okay, that is it for the support tree. I hope I've answered all of your questions about the masteries in this tree. If I haven't, if you have any additional questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. Likewise, if I've missed something or if I've gotten something wrong, put those in the comments below as well so I can make a correction in a future video. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and consider joining our Discord community. Thanks so much for hanging out. I've been Colred. I will see you in another video soon.